What's up, everyone? Welcome to a very special Mythic Conversations. I say that most episodes, I think. They're all very special, aren't they? But no, this is a special episode because it has become a tradition on the kind of end of a Figura Obscura drop, after a Figura Obscura drop, to do a show like this where I'm joined by none other than Eric Treadaway, and we talk all about the new Figura. It's kind of part of the Figura drop experience, right? From the teaser to the drop to Dorklear's video to this show to people getting it in hand. It's part of this very unique thing that we have in the world of toy collecting called Figura Obscura. So I'm super excited to do that tonight. Yes. Ooh. So Kevin Boots saying super chats are enabled. Did not realize that those had been enabled, but there you go. Yes, apparently they are. Thank you very much, Kevin Boots. And with that, I'm going to bring up none other than Eric. Eric, thank you very much for being a part of this tonight.
Thank you for having me. Always fun to do this.
So I was thinking tonight about this, and I realized that I just said that this has become a Figura Obscura tradition. I actually think the first one that we did was for Father Christmas. So that would have been what, 2 years ago now?
Yeah, I guess it would be.
So we've done 3 Figura Obscuras the last few years. So we started, really that means it's only the first 2 that we didn't have a show like this to recap Krampus and Headless Horseman. But since Father Christmas, we've been able to do it. And I know that I really enjoy getting some time to sit down with you and to talk about the new figure, the new release, and just, kind of dig into the mindset behind this particular character. And no surprise, I'm very excited for this one because this is from the story that we all know I love so much, A Christmas Carol. Of course, we're talking about the drop this week of Ghost of Christmas Past. So tell us a little bit about, the start of this process when we, I guess, decided to do this figure and to do this kind of series. Because if memory serves me correctly, when we did Marley, at that point, we didn't say, hey, we're going to do this as a little series. Marley was, kind of meant to be a one and done, but somewhere along the way, the idea to go a little bit deeper came up.
Yeah, it was definitely Marley. I definitely kind of thought of as a one shot when we did that one. Especially when we're looking at what we're doing with Halloween figures, and you mentioned Headless Horseman, and Headless Horseman, I know some people have said they would like an Ichabod Crane figure, but really, that's probably about as far as you could go with it if you're really stretching it. I question how many people would actually, come out and want to buy an Ichabod Crane figure, but certainly you couldn't go very deep into the story. Or Mask of the Red Death very much made sense for a one and done type of a figure. Whereas, once we did Marley, and of course, your enthusiasm for the story really came into play. And, you kind of worked on me a little bit with the idea of doing the series. But, I did see the wisdom in that. And when you actually step back and look at the story and look at how iconic the ghosts in that story are, it just on that level alone, it makes sense to as subject matter that we can go back to the well a few times and make some compelling figures out of it. But there's also the realization that as plentiful as the Halloween type monster choices are, Christmas is a little tougher. Especially, if we're, as we are looking at this line as something that we're doing for the long haul. So then it just, much like if things with Figura happen, just all the ideas started falling into place, and it became clear that follow-ups to Jacob Marley made a lot of sense. And I mean, of course, once Marley came out and you started seeing the requests and the interest in it, then it really becomes a no-brainer when you see that people are excited about the idea of such a thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things that I had posted on some of the write-ups we did for this figure is this is the first time that we have a second distinct release from a series in hand. And it's kind of, in some ways, you're splitting hairs there because we did the Gods of Ancient Egypt earlier this year. So Anubis and Bastet, they were released at the same time. So we've got two figures in that series. And when we did the follow-up show after that release, we talked about the reason we released two up front was because we wanted to start that series, and we're going to explore that in the future. But this is the first time that we've had two distinct slots where the series has continued. So it's kind of special for that. I always think about when I was a kid, my family used to get Hallmark ornaments. Do you remember those at all?
Oh, like the keepsakes?
Yeah, like the keepsake
ornaments.
Yeah. Every single year you'd get one that had, it had the year on it and stuff. And it was kind of cool to look forward to that every single year. So for me, there's kind of a part of that in this release as well, kind of looking forward to adding to a collection year in and year out as you build towards, this set of characters.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you bring that up because, I know that you're a big fan of the season, and, as am I. And, I do think back to any of those types of holiday traditions or releases that would come out, and when it was a series, it was there's that anticipation of what's it going to be this year. I remember even pre-keepsake ornaments, there was this line of ornaments called Critter Sitters that were at Kmart, and so for a while it was that, and then they kind of disappeared. And when we first started going to Target always had a plush every year that it was there was a $10 one and a $5 one. They were cheap, and you'd walk into the store and they're all over the place. And so it was just exciting that first time you'd walk into Target the next year to see what it is this year. And then of course keepsake ornaments. We did those, and we're always couldn't wait to see what the new ones were. And then when our kids were born, we started the same thing where they get one a year. And so I love that aspect of Figura as well. I mean, it's even a little more dialed in here with the Christmas Carol stuff. But beyond that, just a Halloween time figure, a holiday time figure, I don't know. It brings back a little of that feel, which is cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, I think another thing that I love about this too, and when I lobbied for this, Marley, like you said, made a lot of sense. Marley, the look of Marley with the chains and everything, it's influenced so many other representations of ghosts. We're both big fans of Disney and Haunted Mansion as well. There's clearly some influence there. So that was one that, hit on a lot of notes, I think.
Yeah.
But I always loved the ghosts in this story because they are so distinctly different looking. That's one of the things that I really got excited for, is thinking big picture and looking ahead towards having a series of these. These particular ghosts have very distinct looks, but interestingly, as iconic as Marley is, where Marley based on the cash boxes and the chains and the keys and the wrap around his head, there are so many iconic pieces. This particular ghost, this follow-up Ghost of Christmas Past, I would suggest was probably one of the more challenging ones for us to do in this series, because this is the one that is, the description in the book is quite frankly all over the place. It's not super distinct, which is appropriate for this ghost that is described as fluctuating in its distinctness. That's actually a quote from the book, but it's also, even in other popular presentations, been represented very, very differently. So when we first started talking about this and you started thinking about this character, talk to us a little bit about some of the first things you were thinking that you wanted to bring into your version of the Ghost of Christmas Past.
I mean, I think going into it, like, this one was the one that was most, I guess, intimidating to me, just in that I think it's arguably the toughest sell out of the group, as far as finding a distinct look and kind of voice for the character. And like you said, like, it's the one I think that's been portrayed the most diversely over the years. So it's not as iconic maybe as some of the other ones.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, it was that created a challenge. On another hand, it also opened the doors for like an interpretation and getting creative with it. And really, and this was, I think, part of like what the convincing for me, like, to move forward. So, because it wasn't even just a matter of like, do we do more Christmas Carol characters? It's do we move right into another one, And what convinced me was when you shared some passages from it with me that specifically talked about multiple limbs, the fluctuations in the character. And it was one of those things where that all of a sudden, something clicked in my head. Just that it wasn't even like a specific visual. It was just that the possibilities started to click. And like, because the approach with Figura is, as we're not doing a twisted version, we're not doing an extreme version, anything like that. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel with these things, but it is, there is a certain aesthetic and kind of theme or mood that these hit, that I think, like, having that kind of more otherworldly, supernatural element that we could kind of ratchet it up to the next level, that really got me excited about the character, and just, like I said, excited about the possibilities of where we could go with it.
Yeah, like I said, it is interesting because of the 4 ghosts, if you count Marley, it is the one that is the most open to interpretation, but the one that right out of the gate, I remember those conversations. And this was going to be a character that was going to be challenging in the same way that Father Christmas was challenging. And going back to those conversations, I remember distinctly sitting down and saying, okay, do we go with barbarian Santa or do we go with like a traditional Father Christmas? And at that point, I don't think Figura Obscura had its full identity yet, right? You know, that was, we had only had 2 releases, just Krampus and Headless Horseman by that point. So Father Christmas to me was really where we started getting more of the identity of how this was going to be, what this line was going to be, the faithful representations. And the fact that we did go with the faithful representation of an old world Father Christmas really, I think, set the stage for a lot of stuff. So with this, it was interesting to say, okay, we know that she's represented. Well, we say she, that was a conversation at first too. Is it a male or female? But we knew that this character wasn't a monster. That's the whole thing. And we talk about this all the time, that we know there's a, you know, very important part of our fan base that knows us and loves us for the monstrous stuff. So that was also one of the conversations early on, was how do we do something that's a faithful representation, but like you said, has this visual interest, has a level of creepiness to it. And one of the things I love about this release is the different layers there are to this character. There are so many different display options. As a collector and customizer, I love the fact that we've got the 4 arms, we've got the different faces. There's a lot going on here. So talking about what you were just mentioning with the fluctuations in the look, thinking about the different things you can do with limbs, you know, because the book actually talks about having multiple heads, having 10 legs, having no head. There was a lot of crazy stuff, but you very quickly zoned in on wanting to do 4 arms, correct?
Yeah, that one just, I don't know, fascinated me for some reason. It's, I don't know. I like that it you know, it allows the character to be like more than human. You know, like like a hint of monstrousness, without really going there completely. But it also, like, you know, it kind of plays into like some like deity type visuals as well, which I liked with this character, because you know, she's kind of got like the winter queen look, and so, like, I don't know, like there's like the multiple arms and like the crown and everything, they play off of each other in an interesting way to me. But yeah, I mean, that fluctuation thing was interesting. I mean, we did have discussions, you know, whether, you know, the character was male or female. We ultimately decided to push more in the female direction with this, which is, you know, a fairly common approach to the character. And also, I mean, from the standpoint of, you know, I'm thinking of this group as like a, you know, a wave of figures or a line, and you want like the visual diversity like between these different figures. And so, you know, it just adds to the, you know, the visual texture of what we're doing with these figures. And you know, kind of going to the, you know, you mentioned the monster thing, like when Brad was shooting the video for this, you know, so far, like, you know, he's been shooting the dragon and Frankenstein and skeletons and stuff like that. And like, I think he was kind of struck when he started filming this, like he had to shoot it and approach it in a different way because, you know, there's no stitches, there's no jagged edges and blades and, you know, gnashing teeth and stuff like that. Like there's a quiet to this figure. it's smooth surfaces, very fair color scheme, very a lot of subtlety. This just the difference that the skin tone and the dress are just so subtle in the difference in tones and things like that. But especially when I saw the video of it, she's very eerie, particularly when you put on the full, fully realized ghost face. Then still like I keep looking over at it, but still like fits the character, and still there's a beauty to it. Yep. But there's just enough of a ghostliness to it where, like I said, she's haunting. And then to your point of the fluctuation, like I like it talks about how the character's simultaneously old and young, and so that was one of, like, for me, the biggest challenges and biggest like kind of explorations in this figure was, first the basic face, like the one we show on the package art and stuff, where she needed to look, I wanted her to look mature enough that, she reads as an adult, but the face is soft enough where, she could be on the younger side. There's an innocence to the face, but also she looks, at the same time, she looks powerful and formidable. And then to take that even further to, that did that half and half face, where you're actually seeing the fluctuation between the two. Which that was, that was a fun, a fun thing to experiment because it's just very different than, and very specific to the character.
Yeah. And I mean, you've talked before about the fact that Figura Obscura is a nice palette cleanser for you. And I have to imagine, just being because so much of what you do is very monstrous. There was actually a comment that someone made about this figure saying they prefer their figures to be more fighty. And I commented that we've got lots of figures that are fighty, that it's nice to change things up every now and again. So, I know that from a marketing standpoint, it's nice to be able to show images and present something that's different than what we normally do. I have to imagine that this character, with those soft edges, with that subtlety, was just creatively interesting for you as well.
Yeah, definitely. Again, I go back to just talking about the, thinking about, the Christmas Carol figures as a group, or, even if you want to think of the year of figures that we've done this year as a group, doing a Leodicius figure, or skeletons, or whatever it might be, like, I love doing those figures. People that gravitate toward those types of characters. But I think, but if that was the only thing that we did, I think it would get stale. And again, it's that mix that the more the more we can mix up the character shape, sizes, colors, textures, soft goods, no soft goods. It just, you think about your shelf, it makes that grouping just so much more interesting. And, sometimes it's cool to do a shelf where it is an army of 20 of the same figure. But, that's the point of that display. Whereas, doing a figure like this, especially like with this, white color scheme and stuff, like, this figure really stands out. We do a lot of darker figures. But there's also the part too where like a lot of people prefer their figures fighty, which
that was the exact phrase they used. I didn't make that one up.
I like it. It very much describes, the kind of thing that we talk about. Like I've talked about like, the figures like an implied violence. Again, it is like, it's the sharp teeth, the angry face, the sharp edges and stuff like that. Like there's a, like a visceral quality that people respond well to. But, I would imagine there's at least a handful of people out there, this might be their favorite figure that we've ever done. And that's the way I like to think about these when I'm working on them is, this figure is going to be like, that's going to be somebody's figure. I think I've talked about this before, but it was the way I used to approach it. I remember when we were doing DC classics for Mattel, and every one of those figures, like one of those figures is somebody's favorite hero, somebody's favorite villain. And I can remember, like, it struck me early because in one of the very early waves we did Killer Moth, which, was an obscure, wildly designed and colored figure. But, we knew that there were people out there that had entire web pages dedicated to Killer Moth. And like, the thought of how thrilled that at least that one person would be when that Killer Moth figure was announced. I don't know, like that's one of the great things about doing this is, that somebody's going to get that kind of enjoyment out of it. It's it may be one, it may be two, but that's the reason to get it right.
Yeah. I love that comment you made about any figure you're working on or we're releasing is bound to be someone's favorite figure. I think a lot of times we lose sight of that, and I even commented on this at one point where there genuinely is nothing you can release that's going to make everybody happy. There's no universal thing you can release that everyone is going to love unequivocally the same. So we've always kind of taken the approach to remain true to what we're passionate about, to do the figures that we really like. And, I know that's something you've talked about over your career, being able to release figures that you believed in and just being thankful that other people believe in it as well and love it. And I mean, I think Figura Obscura is definitely a testament to that because these are all, fairly standalone. It is something that you pick and choose which projects are most exciting to you at that time.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think that's just, it's where all of this stuff comes from, that motivation. I don't know. I think it keeps us in the right, moving in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot out there to potentially distract us, that, to kind of pull us off course. And I think, just kind of holding true to the, like, what interests people around here, what we're passionate about. They may not all be winners, but, at least they're not winners for the right reasons.
Well, I think that, and we say this all the time, not every figure is going to hit the same for every person. I mean, I even look at like some of the Mythic figures we do. We can release a figure like the skeleton, which so many people were like, this is the most fun figure I've ever had. I love this thing so much. And then you get some of our other fans. I'm thinking about Joe Russo. Joe Russo got it. He's like, this is a great figure, but I'm not as into skeletons. I like knights. Everyone has their preferences. that's one of the reasons I think we've had so much success, is because the line in the company is as diverse as it is.
Yeah. I mean, if you were trying to, chase that one group of people, you may hit a few times, but if you miss, you're missing everybody. So yeah, I mean, we're lucky in that, we've been able to create a line that has so many different character types, and that there's so many people that like all of it. Of course, that is great, but there's also these subgroups that are so passionate about their thing, which is cool. It adds a lot of fun to the community, and when we do voting, or the campaigning and all that kind of stuff.
And we do take that into account. I mean, when you think about passionate fan base, you have to think about the dwarf fans, you know? And I mean, their passion for the figures influence some of the things that we do. There have been multiple times where we've looked at stuff and said, hey, would a dwarf fit in here? It's been a couple waves. We know that there's a hunger for that. So, I mean, the passion of the fans for specific things absolutely is taken into account as we plan the stuff that we're going to do.
Yeah.
So looking at this picture again here, this is kind of the creepy look for this character. It's got the fully decayed face. We did include 2 different hair pieces. So the crown on the main look is not removable, but the hair actually comes off. It's a separate piece. And we did a separate hair piece as well. And I remember early on talking about this design, and one of the things that I loved really right out of the gate was when you started working on this, I realized that as wonderful a Ghost of Christmas Past that this made, this was also going to be a wonderful start to so many other creepy, like female white-robed apparitions. And, as I started looking, La Llorona from Mexico is one of the first ones that came into mind. And obviously, this character doesn't look Mexican in any way. But again, I said it's a start. But I've seen a number of people saying that they bought an extra of these to make a Banshee. Banshee is a really, really cool one that you can make. As I started looking into others, there's apparently all these. Have you ever heard of like the White Lady kind of legends? Apparently, there's some. There's all. It's like a weird. I guess it's like a weird kind of specter that has very regional variations of it. Like there's a different version in New York than there is in Pennsylvania, than there is in California. So lots of really cool stuff there. These like Japanese ghosts. So there's tons of creepy kind of characters that people can use this figure for outside of it just being a great Ghost of Christmas Past. And I love that all of those elements are at play here with this figure.
Yeah, like this. I mean, we did talk about that when she was getting made. You take that hair and put it on the other head, and then take the back arms off. You have a pretty, a very solid, just base female figure ready to go. I mean, one of the things, I don't know if we've talked about it at all or if it's been shared. I mean, I know we haven't shown pictures of it, but she's got an entirely soft good costuming on. And so, when that, we had the problem of what happens when that comes off, because, well, there you go. The picture is much better than words, but yeah. So, I mean, it basically this figure gives us a blank that we've never had before.
Yep.
So again, yeah, from a customizing standpoint, she's like ready to, start creating whatever you want. Again, like I said, either one of those heads is a good starting point, and then that hair is a pretty, kind of a standard hair design purposefully so that, it could be a base for many, many a custom.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, one that I shared this week is I drilled some holes in the back of her to make her into an angel. And I did this before I had seen Dorklair's review video, where Dorklair pointed out that the wings that come with Chris's D13 angels apparently plug right into the back. And his Hanukkah angel that he did, they're bright silver wings that perfectly match her belt. It's a wonderful, easy swap that Dorklair did to create his version of an angel. But again, you've got the creepy version, you've got the forearm, just strange, ethereal type spirit. And then you've got something like this that works really well as just a classic looking angel.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of, a lot of potential with this one. There's, I think back to just where we've been with this line for so many of the early years where, both 1.0 and 2.0, we had flesh upper arms, flesh torso, flesh thighs. Mm-hmm. On the females, we did have hands and feet. We didn't even have that on the 1.0s. Mm-hmm. To now being in a position where, we essentially have a near nude buck to start working on top of. So, even multiple hand sets, multiple heads to go with it. I don't know. It's nice to be in this spot where we are now, where we have so much more tooling to play with on these figures. And when you go just being a month out of Legion's Con, like going through and looking and seeing the type of customs and add-ons and everything that everybody's doing, like obviously, like, everybody's skill level and their like customizing game has elevated over the years. I mean, even just the displays, the way people present, but I think there's also there's so many more parts for them to paint, to alter, to make, new 3D pieces, printed pieces to, to accentuate and stuff like that. It's just cool. I think back to that first Legion's Con, and there's so many creative and awesome customs there, and that was off of so little. So now, I know how much we enjoy having the parts library. So
yep, everyone does.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I first saw this, I said to you, customizers are going to love that new waist piece, which, I mean, that waist piece underneath that little, it looks like a pair of panties, but underneath that pelvis area, it is a normal 2.0 pelvis that we're used to, that has the little port to plug in like a loin cloth type piece. But because that was never designed at that time not to have armor around the waist, this was the solution. I mean, that really just replaces that kind of waist armor, but it does create this, bare buck that you mentioned, that I love the fact that this is going to be a springboard for so many creative projects going forward.
Absolutely.
Interesting question here from Kirby, saying, I wanted to ask Eric, how does he transition from the abundance of textures on the dragon to doing something softer, smoother, like on this figure? Was it a challenge to get out of one mode to the other? Well, I mean, you did this long before the dragon, but right. I think the question is still totally relevant to go from one type of a project to another.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to your the term, palette cleanser. And I kind of feel that's the way not just moving from like one line to the other, but moving from one type of figure to the other. There's different challenges in doing a smooth figure. Just everything shows on it. With texture, a lot of things get covered by the texture or hidden by the texture. Mm-hmm. Whereas something like this, it's delicate details and again, just a lot of subtlety there. But I enjoy doing both, and like you said, this I actually did before the dragon, but after doing the dragon, switching to a different type of figure, say like an armored figure, was it's a nice break. In the same way, like after working on cosmic armor for a long time, where everything is geometric and all the contours need to be smooth and clean and everything, mm-hmm. to then when I'm done with some of those, then to jump into a figure that's covered with some kind of texture or like rust or heavily damaged type character or something like that. Like it's so refreshing after doing the one, but by the time I get back to doing that cosmic armor, doing the night armor again, like I'm ready to get back into it, and it's enjoy getting back in there and taking those challenges again.
So let's look at this figure again. This was a character where not a ton of accessories that made a lot of sense for this character. Very few things are referenced in the text. There's the holly leaf and there's the extinguisher. She comes with both of those. You also added the staff, but you also made the decision to continue a tradition that we've had with the last handful of Figura Obscura releases, and that is adding a diorama style element. So in this particular one, we've got this, kind of street lamp. Talk to us a little bit about your decision to add that particular element, and bigger picture, just how you've been enjoying adding those new environment type pieces to these figures.
I mean, part of it was just you and I talking about like what environments she shows up in the story. Mm-hmm. And there are outdoor scenes with her where a street lamp made a lot of sense. It sets the era. It sets the location. In not so specific ways, but certainly in kind of that overall. Like most people have seen some interpretation of A Christmas Carol, and so it just kind of brings you into the story a little bit, and it gives just like a little slice of the environment. Mm-hmm. But I think there's also something, again, like she has a flame theme going on with the illumination from the head and the candle snuffers, and it just has a nice relationship there between those two. And again, I think, like, I don't know, when I look at that, that snow over the cobblestone and that little bit of snow around the lamppost, and I don't know, like for me, like I can hear the quiet of walking mm-hmm. through the snow. Yeah. And the, kind of the coldness of it, but the flame, like that warmth of that flame, and like the warmth of the illumination of her head, like kind of permeating that cold atmosphere. And so it just, I don't know, there's just something about it that, it carried through, like her, that kind of, like I said earlier, like kind of haunting, ethereal vibe that she's got going on. I also, like, when I was a kid, I had this, my parents gave me this Christmas decoration that was like one of their things that I thought was cool. So they gave it to me, and I put it in my room, where it was, I don't know, probably maybe like little taller than this, but everything was like bulkier in proportion to this, but it was a street lamp that had like glitter on it and like fake holly like wrapped around it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like there was one of those things that just kind of like captured my imagination as a kid. And it was one of my favorite decorations to put out on my shelf. And so there's just like, I like associate that with the season quite a bit. And so even like that, like, I mean, that was like like not really motivation for it, but it was just one of those things that like, it just, just kind of hit home in a certain way with this. So like it's a very Christmassy object to me. So I liked it for that reason as well.
I love that. And I love that part of the story. I didn't know that before tonight's conversation. So that makes me love the addition of it even more. We've got a comment here that it says that it reminds someone of the pole from Narnia, which I love. This happens to us all the time where people see things in the figures that they're 100% right in seeing it, but we never saw it. Like it was never something we really thought about or considered. Because I remember when we were talking about those different creepy, characters I mentioned earlier, the White Witch from Narnia is one of the ones we had talked about. This would be a nice fill-in for, but interestingly, I never connected the lamppost to Narnia, and that's totally one that people found and can do. So I love when people can see the different ways that they can use some of these parts. That adds that extra level of fun to this for me.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. And Narnia did not cross my mind in any way when working on this, but it absolutely, because I did see somebody comment on the witch,
White Witch,
the White Witch the other day, and absolutely. I think it just kind of goes to show though, like where, some of these visual themes, of kind of this like winter queen type of a character. I mean, they're things that have been around for a long time. They find their way into, into different stories and different media and all that. Because, if you really look back at the early renditions of this character, it looked more like a little girl. Definitely, at least the ones that seem to like stick the most. Like it looks like a little girl holding the snuffer, which, certainly is not, elements of that are here, but what we did was very different. But if you go through and you look at stage productions and, film adaptations and stuff, some of these more, again, I keep saying like Winter Queen, like imagery have found their way in to those interpretations and on some level have certainly stuck.
Yeah, for sure. So one element that we haven't spoken about yet with this figure, outside, I mean, you mentioned that she's covered in soft goods as you were talking about the bare base underneath it. But this is a figure as a nice contrast to Marley, where Marley ended up having no soft goods. Marley, you did that jacket fully sculpted so you could get kind of the detail you wanted in it. But when it came time for this figure, right out of the gate, it was pretty obvious that soft goods were going to play a pretty big role. And of course, as always, the team from C. Jessam did a wonderful job on these soft goods. But I actually think if we look back and we remember this project, I think the simplicity of her soft goods proved to be one of the biggest challenges, because there was such a temptation to go a little bit more elaborate with those soft goods. And we actually did see some back and forth where there were more frills and more decoration that had to be dialed back to get to where we ended up. But I absolutely love the end result here. There's just such a, the material is sheer and it adds to that ghostly quality. And there's just such a beauty and simplicity to what they put together that I think it works wonderful for this character.
Yeah, I mean, we even, CJ even experimented a little bit with some more textured and elaborate fabrics and stuff that, in their own right were pretty gorgeous. But they just didn't, in my mind at least, fit what this character's look was. And one of the dangers, that we were running into with these garments was that they would go and start leaning heavily toward like a wedding dress sort of a look, which was, not really what we were going for here. But, the end result, just the lightness of it, the sheerness of the fabrics, just the little embellishments with the scroll pattern on the dress itself, the shimmer of the belt, it just works tremendously on her. And I think, like I said, no soft goods on Marley, but it was essential here. Just one, to get, I think, the softness that we were looking for, the sheerness of the fabric, the way that we want it. But most importantly was just for a character that's talking about, constant movement and fluctuation and everything, all of the posing that these soft goods, these layers and layers of soft goods give us, it's the closest thing that we could really do to kind of replicate that swirling, just movement that the character, that's implied in the story that the character always has. I've got a couple of samples in here, and really was playing with it at length for the first time a little earlier this afternoon, and just enjoying like the movement and like just the dynamic quality that they're bringing to the piece. Because I was able to, I was getting some good poses, and then kind of finishing it out, wrapping those capes like they're billowing in the wind, and taking the belt and doing things and moving that into more dynamic poses. And it just was it all came together so well.
And that's, again, the looking at the original text, which influences the design of the figure. There was so much to work with, yet so much that just wasn't clearly defined, that allowed us to put our spin on it. It talks about the brilliance of this character's belt. So, that was one of the first things that we said to CJ is like, the belt's got to be shiny or brilliant. There's going to be something that the belt really stands out. And then it refers to the white dress as being trimmed in summer flowers. So, really, those are two of the only descriptive aspects of the character's garments that we were able to provide. But I think CJ, that team did a wonderful job taking that little bit of information and really realizing it in a very beautiful and, spectral way with this character. I've seen a couple comments here from Trevor and from Dorclair, two people who have this figure in hand already because they're, obviously part of the release. And they're both commenting on the sheerness of the fabric being perfect. And Trevor's also talking about the multiple layers, because it is not just one layer. There's multiple layers to these garments that really add to that shimmery kind of flowy feel.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can, since they are sheer, depending on how many layers you're looking through, you're getting various levels of transparency going on and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it really plays up that ghostly look that is somewhat, it's hard to get out of solid solid materials. But I think it ended up being very successful and accomplishing that.
Yeah. So I think we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, Eric. I think we've got to talk about this. So there's a funny story to this, and this is obviously the artwork that is on the back of the magnetic panel. So when you get the figure, really the largest untouched area of any Figura release is the back of that magnetic panel. So this is what we've got here. So when we decided that we were going to do more than one release with Marley, it was kind of decided that, okay, because Nate painted some members of the studio as ghosts onto the Marley box, he was going to follow that trend, and he was going to put members of the studio in different paintings on subsequent releases. So pretty early on, it was decided that Jim would make a wonderful fill-in for Fezziwig. And then he picked some other characters to go in here. Now, Jim did not know about this the entire time. So the first time Jim saw this was when the figures arrived at the studio, correct?
Yeah.
Were you there for that by any chance?
For part of it, yeah. Yeah.
I have to imagine that he was surprised and delighted.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, Nate just nailed that portrait, in such an entertaining way, because it looks just like Jim, obviously, but just I like the lightheartedness of it.
Yes.
And just the motion of the hair and everything. Like, it just, I don't know. It just, it's such a great way to set the stage for this party scene. And it's also, it's such a contrast to last year's package. Yeah. Which I love that though. It was, in some ways doing the same thing as last year, but in such a different way that it's just, you just completely redefined how to incorporate studio members into the package.
So when I came down to the studio a few weeks ago for Legions Con, I come into George's office and I see this box there. And it's the first time I've held one in hand. So I open it up and I'm looking at the inner panel. And I said I can't remember who it was, but I said to somebody, did Jim see this artwork? And they looked at me and they said, did you see this artwork? And I'm thinking, yeah, of course I did. I saw it months ago. Because as part of this process, not only do I see all the packaging art from just an approval and kind of review standpoint, but specifically with Figura Obscura, I need to take that artwork to make those little booklets. So I had already done all of this and made the booklet. Well, as I'm looking at this thing, when someone says, did you look at it? I noticed the character all the way over to the right there that Nate thought it would be great fun to paint me into this painting. And I burst out laughing because I was baffled. Like, I saw it and my brain didn't register what I was seeing at first. And then it came out that apparently this was a gag that Nate thought would be funny, to the point that I was actually sent fake artwork. Like, the whole group that was involved in this joke cared about it enough to add a layer of complexity to this project that is impressive. they they sent me fake artwork, let me put fake artwork in the booklet, and then took those files and had to redo that page to incorporate the correct artwork.
Yes, that is what happened. I think I even found out about it accidentally, because it was done before I knew it was even happening. So, some serious shenanigans going on around here.
And people asking for the alternate artwork, it was just one of the characters moved over there. I think it might have been the character that's next to Vern. It might have been Vern, actually, that was moved over there. It was this exact scene. It was just two characters that were in slightly different places. So it's not, like I said, it was very, even when I looked at that's why when I opened up and looked at it in the George's office, I didn't immediately say, hey, this isn't what I remember seeing, because it looked so incredibly similar. But yeah, that was very funny. Even when Dorklair got it, that's the first thing he messaged me. He messaged me laughing, saying, oh my goodness, I can't believe that inside panel that they painted you in the classic Jeremy Arms cross pose.
You are all over these Christmas Carol projects. You're gonna have to see. I don't know. We'll have to see what that next package looks like.
Like, I'm honored and slightly embarrassed at the same time, which I guess that tracks. That's a good place to be. But the other characters in this, it's funny too, because at first Nate didn't paint any other people into it, and we had to go back and say, hey, can you just paint some other party goers into this painting to flesh it out? But we've got Vern all the way to the left. We've got Cameron, who, when they were talking about this the other day on the Saturday live show, they were remarking how Cameron just looks perfect for this period. And I can't agree more.
That's kind of like George with the,
yes.
The last package. It was just like, oh, yeah, that works.
He fits here so well. Of course, we just talked about Jim, who I don't know if I like Feziosi or Prezziwig better. They both work wonderfully well, but I don't know which camp I'm in. But we've got Jim, and that's actually Jim's wife, Barb. That's right behind him as Mrs. Fezziwig. We've got Cookie playing violin. A couple people asked if that was Eric Miller, and I could see that as well, but that is actually Cookie. And then we've got, of course, Walter here pointing at me, and there we go.
It's that's the poster that everybody's gonna want.
There we go. I mean,
Nate's gonna sell out of those prints in seconds next year.
It's gonna be a hot commodity. But the front of the packaging, again, Nate did a wonderful job here capturing this character. I love to be able to see those paintings he does, those full body figural paintings on the front of the packages. They're some of my favorite pieces that he does for each of these releases.
Yeah. I mean, it's, what's cool about this one to me, with again getting into like the holiday type theming, there's just certain recurring elements, and so cool color schemes, snowy settings, snow falling out of the sky. We've done Krampus, we've done Father Christmas. We've done Jacob Marley, now Ghost of Christmas Past. And the fact that Nate's been able to hit a completely different note with each one of these, even though there are recurring elements in some of these packages, like, it's pretty astonishing to me that just, how individualize each one of those holiday release packages are. So it's and this one I think captures the beauty of the character and just the again that kind of quiet power that she has.
Yeah. And of course, Nate's art used in a number of other products as well. So we've got the greeting cards, looking kind of from left to right here. We've got the greeting cards. We've got the enamel pin. We've got the T-shirts and I say T-shirts. Retro Rags, they now do a whole slew of apparel. They upgraded their systems a few months ago, right around the time actually that we dropped Frankenstein's Creature. And now beyond just like T-shirts or potentially hoodies, there's a number of other things that they can offer. Everything from like little kids onesies to like big giant Sherpa blankets. So very cool to see the kind of apparel that they're able to do. And all of that is available at retroraglimited.com or on the website on Store Horseman. If you go to the apparel tab, you can get it there as well. This is just an example of one of the T-shirts. Of course, the coffee mug, and then that's the little booklet that comes free in every one of these packages. The booklets are something that I love doing, but I'm super excited that now we gave Stave 1 the first chapter with the Marley. Now we've got Stave 2. Even like that aspect, like being able to get, presumably the full story across these releases. I think that's going to be a really cool kind of little booklet of all of Nate's art and all of this original text. That's going to be something that you're going to be able to add to this this collection as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's something really special about doing a singular figure, but there's also something very special about doing a series.
Yeah.
And that's something like that is exactly where, in this case, doing really kind of like a mini series, having those consistent items across multiple figures interpreted a little differently each time is going to be, it's just going to be something cool to have in hand. Yeah, I mean, having these books in here is, so many of us grew up on, Masters of the Universe, Superpowers, things like that with mini comics in them. And this, is the Figura version of that. It's just something extra with the figure that you can delve into, spend a little more time with. So I really like that we've been able to incorporate these into these pieces.
Yeah, me too. And you talked about, the specialty of a series, the specialty of a single release. I mean, it's always so interesting because you see comments. Like I see a lot of the comments that people make, and there are times that you want to reply and you can't because you can't reveal other things that are coming. So, I mean, all I can say is that while we love the idea of series, we also love these single releases and being able to go in, do a single character from something that, is relevant to Figura Obscura and then move on to something else. So there's a lot of exciting and surprising things that I think we have in store for people in the new year with this line in particular.
Right. Well, I mean, if you look at like this year of Figura releases, we did in the spring, we did, the first time we've done 2 figures at once. Mm-hmm. And so that was, kind of a series like approach on that one a little bit. Then we did Frankenstein's Creature, which is, very much a singular release. Like, it stands completely on its own. And, I can say for certain, like, we're not going to go in and do an angry town villager figure as the next Halloween Figura figure. But then, but then we've got this one, which is our first year to year continuation of a series. So like, I like that we're able to, even within something as unique as Figura, mix it up like that.
I agree.
Keeps it interesting for us, keeps it interesting for, for the fans out there, tuning in to see what's next.
Yeah. So I do have a couple comments I'm going to go to. One thing I do want to mention, Michael Berger said earlier, thank you to Four Horsemen for the Figura Obscura subline. He mentioned that the passion for the story got him into reading the original Dickens story last year. He's looking forward to a reread. Michael, if you're still tuning in, one suggestion I would have for you is if you enjoyed A Christmas Carol by Dickens, there's another book called Jacob T. Marley that is the events of Christmas Carol are contained in it, but it's actually from Jacob Marley's perspective. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. If you like the original, this adds so much more to that tale, and it's very much written in kind of a Dickens-like style. So definitely check that one out as well. I think you'll enjoy it very much. Soul Power asked if this one has a secret trinket inside, and there is a secret hidden in this package. We have asked people to please keep it secret until Christmas morning. You figure that's a pretty typical for this time of year, right? That you keep secrets until Christmas morning when everyone can open them. So to kind of preserve that coolness of people being able to get it and open it and experience the surprise for themselves, that's what we would request. Question for you here, Eric, said, in your mind, were Krampus and Father Christmas separate figures, or were they a working pair?
Those were definitely separate figures. If for no other reason, when we did Krampus, we had no idea where this was all going. It was very much, we tooled Krampus and Headless Horseman up at the same time. Those were developed together, but then past that, like, we didn't know what what this line was going to become, and certainly like how far we could take some of these figures, because those are very, they use a lot of existing parts.
Jeremy's still talking. Good night.
See you later, Chris. That's dedication right there.
Oh, there he is. Yeah.
But those two figures were very very much reused parts and minimal new tooling. And that's another spot where we saw the success of those two figures, and that gave us we felt the freedom to push a little further with Father Christmas. So I think Father Christmas was another bit of a turning point in that respect as well. But yeah, they definitely, were not envisioned as a pair.
Derek asked this earlier and just getting around to this now. He was curious where you get your inspiration from. Do you draw it from life or just your imagination? I know that's a very large kind of question, but good one to ask. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
I mean, both of those things. Anywhere that I can get it. It's one of those things you can't, unfortunately, like, you can't produce it. You can't force it to happen. So like, I'm just thankful whenever it does hit. And I feel like I kind of go through cycles where there's periods of time where I'm producing, and then there's periods of time where it's almost like my mind like opens up and like I'm taking inspiration from things. It's just I don't know what it is, but sometimes it just feels like it's a switch that goes off where I may see something in a different way than I've ever seen it before, or remember something that I, hadn't thought of in years. But yeah, I mean, it can be anything, it can be, visiting a place that I haven't visited before. It's a lot of inspiration is from, childhood or like nostalgia, watching a movie and like, just something hitting in a way that, again, makes you think a certain way, or going to the zoo and, seeing an animal, that I haven't seen in a long time, and being like, oh yeah, that would actually make a great figure, so it's all over the place. I'm just happy when it does happen, though.
Yeah, no shortage of inspiration, right?
No, and it feels like a gift, though, when it happens, because it just, I don't know, just to get like, my enthusiasm up, and like to be like, there's nothing like going into like a piece and like being, just like fully excited, about it. And I don't know, that's what, like, you had asked me something about a figure recently, and like I purposely don't start really thinking about it, or especially doing research on a figure until basically I'm ready to get into it, or it's my next project maybe, because that I mean, with Figura, that's where a lot of the inspiration comes from. Is like, once you actually, if it's, let's say it's a character from a book, like going in and reading that book, and finding those descriptions in the texts and having it direct the figure in a different way than you thought it might have been, before starting the project. So yeah, I mean, I hold that research phase off as far as I can. So like, it's all, my mind is consumed by it when I get into it. And, I'm just energized to start sculpting and, seeing what this thing's going to look like.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm the exact opposite, where because I'm approaching it obviously so differently than you. I'm not sculpting it. I'm not doing that work. So I'll go on a tangent where I'll start like exploring something, because we'll talk about things and make decisions at a high level, and then I'll start researching it. And I'm so excited that I want to talk about it that I'll keep just being like, so have you thought about this at all yet? Because I just want to talk about it. I need to talk about it with somebody else.
Well, we'll be doing that soon.
Soon enough. Soon enough. So yeah, I mean, just kind of as a, housekeeping to let people know what's going on. So this particular figure, Ghost of Christmas Past, this went up for sale this past Saturday. Like we always do. We did the teaser on Friday. We did the sale on Saturday. One thing we did a little bit differently this time is the last few figuras that we've done, we've put a certain amount up for sale, and then we've held back a certain amount for future live events. And the last couple, because we had so many, because it sold out by like, Monday, we had so many people who missed out on it for that first drop ask us for another chance at it. So we came back and did yet another drop like the following weekend, pulling that inventory from our show stock. After doing for the last few, for this particular one, we kind of just said, you know what? We imagine that's going to happen. Let's put enough inventory in this first drop that's likely to last us into the following weekend. And that's exactly where we are right now. She is still available on the website, storehorseman.com. Actually pretty cool. This is the first holiday season that, in addition to having, I mean, we've got the Reign of the Beast pre-order. Of course, we've got this Figura Obscura, but we also have a number of other in-stock items at Store Horseman right now. So kind of fully taking advantage of that holiday shopping season, I guess. So this is still available. It'll based on the numbers we have right now, it looks like it'll be available, into this weekend. So if you missed out on this first drop, or if you're listening to our conversation tonight and you're realizing that you need more, she is still available on storehorseman.com. Interesting question here. Joel's asking, how far out or ahead of time do you start planning figures? So let's talk about Figura Obscura specifically, because it is, Figura Obscura is new for us still, in the sense that these are in-stock items. For so many years, everything was pre-order only. Obviously, we still have a lot of our new big waves that are pre-order driven, like Reign of the Beast right now. But a few years ago, we started doing more of these in-stock items, including Figura Obscura. So we start talking about this, in some cases, a year plus before actual release.
Yeah, like everything that we do, it certainly varies. We kind of, some things we probably know 2 years ahead, at least what we think it's going to be. And it really, it gets nailed down a little more than a year ahead usually. But you've talked about this before, but last year with Mask of the Red Death, as of the September prior, I was considering not even doing a Halloween one, just because nothing was hitting. And very late September, early October, I was on a trip, and Mask of, just is one of those things where, just kind of letting, the mind wander. The Mask of the Red Death popped into my head, and I just realized it was perfect. It's perfect. As far as parts that were available, everything about it, it was just oh yeah, this is it. And so, I was sculpting it a couple weeks later. So, it's about as last minute as it could get.
That one came together very interesting, where I remember you coming back and just saying hey, I've decided. Because I remember that there was that indecision of what you were going to do, if you were going to do anything. We've said this probably every time we do one of these particular videos, but you've mentioned, if you ever have to force yourself to sculpt a Figura Obscura, you're doing it wrong. That these are things you need to be excited for and passionate about. So there was genuinely a chance that was going to get passed over. And I remember you getting excited for Mask of the Red Death. And it seems like that excitement translated to you just hitting that project and getting it done very, very fast. It came together really fast.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a good one. It just felt right. It's funny though, because you've talked about it many times. We have this kind of master list that we started early on that just has a lot of potential figures on it, and there's some that have been on there since day one that was not excited about really when they went on. I realized they would make a cool figure, but just the angle to take with it or whatever, it just wasn't really presenting itself. And then, 3 years later, that might, that's going to be an upcoming figure, because it just, I don't know. It just, the vision just kind of became clear. And, sometimes that's just because that inspiration hits, and, the character can be thought of in a little bit of a different way than, maybe what my own preconceived notion was early on. Or it could just be that, compared to 3 years ago, we have so many more parts to play with at our disposal, where, you know, there might be a character that would have been a stretch to make happen back then, that all of a sudden now we've got the goods to make it happen correctly. So
well, you say all the time, you've used this phrase multiple times, even tonight, but across these different shows, that, you know, you have to be able to see it. And, you know, I working with you for the last few years now, I certainly can, you know, comment on that and say that I've seen you do that, where you won't be super excited about a project or a character, but then something will, like you just said, you know, change your mindset or what, and get you thinking about it in a different way. And, you know, you'll suddenly get excited for how it could be presented. Because there's even stuff that you've talked about. I mean, for Figura Obscura specifically, we can, you know, tease a little bit, I guess. You know, there are characters that you're like, I'm super excited for that, but not yet. Like, and they're already slotting down a little bit further, just because of parts availability or timelines. There's a lot of different things that go into play. But that's one of the things that I love about this line, is being on this side of the table. I've said before, I love Figura Obscura. I love the surprise aspect and the variety and what we have coming across, you know, upcoming releases. I really think it's going to show the breadth that we can draw from for this particular line.
Yeah, it's funny you kind of saying that, because, you know, this one, you know, it might be surprising, or but, like, you know, there was a couple times working on the dragon where I despised that figure, because, like, it looked like there's, you know, it looked like a dragon. It would have been fine. I would say a lot of people would have like checked the boxes for what they wanted to see in a dragon figure. But it just wasn't clicking. And so then the challenge is, I mean, we're doing this thing. I got to find what it is to make it click. And so, you know, just it's messing with proportions, playing with it. You know, I don't know what that is. I don't, you know, I didn't really know what was missing at you know, certain points in it. And then, you know, sometimes I have to go down these rabbit holes with, like, texture, proportion, whatever, that eventually just gets thrown in the, you know, in the trash. But it is like, you know, but then there's a certain point, like, I just remember I don't remember something that I did with the neck, or like bulking up the limbs. Like, I don't even remember what it was. I could probably go through old files and figure it out. But there was just a point where I was at, like, a low with it, where I just couldn't crack the code. And then a little bit of this, little bit of that. Might have been, you know, it could have also been doing a print, and, you know, seeing it in hand. And then it was like, you know, it clicked, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, now it looks, because a lot of it was, you know, it's got because I had, like, a picture in my head of what it would look like, at least in essence. And it was, you know, it's kind of like, it's got to, you know, it's got to, you know, what does that Mythic Legion's dragon look like? Like, what makes it ours? And, you know, it's just one of those things, like, couple little moves, and then there it was. And then, like, once that happens, then I can, like, start, like, pushing, you know. That's when, like, the like, kind of more manual labor part of it comes in, where it is, you know, not manual labor. I'm not, no way claiming I'm, you know, doing hard work here with this, but just literally manually going in and, you know, moving from kind of like what I'm sitting back from the screen and, like, doing the roughing, to the actually getting in there by hand and putting those textures in, and, like, really, like finessing it and looking at what the finish line looks like with it.
Well, it's trusting the process, right? I mean, we've got obviously such a dedicated customizing community, in this community and watching this show. And, all of us customizers have been at those points where we're working on something and it looks horrible. Like we are just like, we want to throw in the towel and just, nope, that part's not going to work. But you just got to push yourself through that first phase where it doesn't look good. And then you get to that point where like, you put a coat of paint on and you hit it with the blow dryer and all of a sudden it dries and now it's got the coverage you were looking for. And suddenly you're like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to see this. The paint match is coming. The smoothness of the paint is coming. So I think we can all kind of appreciate you being at that point where you're pushing and then you get to that, epiphany type moment where suddenly you see it.
Well, that is what's cool about, about the Mythic community or Legions community is that I've talked about it before about like when you go to Legions Con and like, we're working up to the last minute, getting our product done and getting our displays done and everything. So is everybody else there.
Yep.
At least a good portion of people there. And so, yeah, like everybody kind of, knows the process, in the same boat sort of a thing. So, that appreciation, I don't know. It's nice.
Well, Eric, we're at 9:00. Thank you again for joining, for being part of this tradition for Figura Obscura drop kind of week, I guess.
Of course.
One question I will answer before we go. Soul Power is asking if we can get an update on the Necronominous wave. So we actually posted an update on that just the other day. The good news is that the first containers from the Necronominous wave are actually on the water right now. So they are on the way from China to New Jersey. This is part of the process where it's, at this point, certainly not definitive when it's going to arrive, exactly how long that transit's going to take, how long it takes to get offloaded over the ship and, through customs and over to us. There's a lot of variables there. But at this point, we are expecting those to arrive in January. Obviously, our team is getting set. So as soon as they arrive, we will be able to turn those around and start filling the direct pre-orders. Like we always do, the direct store Horseman pre-orders will be filled first. Now, this is a multiple container type delivery. We don't know which containers will arrive first. We hope it's the all-ins. We'd love to send those all-ins out first, but if the all-ins are not on the first container, then whatever is on that first container, we'll start shipping out whatever we can. So the good news is there is a light at the end of the tunnel. They will be arriving in January. Once we get closer to that and we know more about the timelines, we will announce those dates, including when the retailer street date will be. Excellent. And there we go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much. I will be back next week. I'm not sure if it's going to be next week or the week after, but one of those 2 weeks. Those are, as crazy it is, the last two shows I have for the year because Christmas and New Year's fall on a Wednesday this year. So I will be taking some time off. But before we do, Joe Vassapolo will be joining the conversation. We will be looking, of course, at the Reign of the Beasts wave. And while we may not be able to do a ton of popping and swapping on this wave, we will at least look at those parts, look at some of those new articulation schemes that Eric designed into these, talk about these figures and what we're excited for with them. So tune in, like I said, either next week or the week after, and we'll get you all that. In the meantime, hit up storehorseman.com, pick up your Ghost of Christmas Past if you haven't already. And everyone, thank you for joining us.